This is going to be a series on Masechet Chagiga, and we're going to try and do an Amud a day, not including Shabbat. It's 68 days to Rosh Hashanah, and some people they want to do a siyum. At least me, I want to get as much learning in as I can, and so you might want to do a siyum before Rosh Hashanah. Maybe you can rack up some learning and some zechuyot. That a yira is a very high form of avoda, and if that's what gets you to relate to Kadosh Baruch Hu, then Rosh Hashanah is the perfect instinct for growth. So we're going to be doing a Chagiga, an Amud a day. I'm going to try and keep it at around 20 minutes, 20-minute Talmud, hashtag 20-minute Talmud, I don't know. And we're going to, not including Shabbat, so Sunday to Friday, 20 minutes each. You may see that I'm doing a Makot series as well. And my recommendation is to choose one, Chagiga or Makot. Don't bite too much. Don't bite more than you can chew. So choose one. The videos will be there. If you want to go back and watch the Makot, learning is not reserved for right before Rosh Hashanah. You can take it upon yourself on Rosh Hashanah to learn it after Rosh Hashanah, whatever, it's your choice. The videos are there for your viewing pleasure. But yeah, so that's available. If you think that you could handle both, unbelievable, but I would highly recommend to choose either Chagiga or Makot and then go back and do the other at another time. But again, it's going to be an Amud a day, Masechet Chagiga. It's a beautiful Masechet. And hopefully we'll learn lots together. And if you want to learn the Lui Nishma somebody, then do it for that. If you want to learn for the Refuah Shleima Lahavdil of somebody, then do it for that. If you want to learn for like this chus of, like I'm learning for this chus of Bani Ziva, then you can do it for that, or for Shalom Bayis, anything you want. Just have that in mind, and B'ezrat Hashem, may all of our Ritzonot align with Hashem, and on Rosh Hashanah may we reap the rewards of our learning in Olam Haba, and may Rosh Hashanah, that God take this into account, So anyways, we're going to start with the Mishnah. So before we get in this, what we're going to talk about in our first Mishnah is going to be that on the Shalosh Regalim, the Bnei Yisrael, they have to ascend to Har Bayit. They have to go to Har Bayit, and then there's another part of it where they have to, it's called their Chayavim Be'Re'iyah, which literally means in seeing. Technically it means in being seen. The Gemara will get to that. But it's their Chayavim in Re'iyah, which is the action of going and seeing, but also there's a tribute that you have to give when you go. And that the value of that tribute is also going to be a machloket between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in the Mishnah. And so the Mishnah is going to open, though, with discussing who's chayavim in going and who's not. So let's just jump in. So hakol chayavim bere'iyah. Everybody is chayavim in re'iyah, which means, for our intents and purposes, somebody who's going to go to Har Bayit. Everybody needs to go to Har Bayit on the Shalosh Regalim. Chutz mecheresh shota v'katan, except for somebody who's a deaf mute, somebody who's deranged, crazy, and a minor. V'tumtum v'androgynous, a tumtum and an androgynous, v'noshim and women, v'avadim she'enam meshuchrarim, and slaves that are not yet freed, v'chole v'zaken, somebody who's sick and somebody who's old, u'mi she'enu yachol la'alos baragel, or somebody who's too injured to walk, to go up on by foot from Yerushalayim to Har Bayit. So now the Mishnah is going to discuss on one point. One of the things that it says is that a katan does not need to go, is not chayav in re'iyah. So the Mishnah is going to ask, Ezuhu katan? What's considered a katan? 3-year-old, 5-year-old? Is it a mental capacity? Is it physical capacity? What's considered a katan here? So the first opinion is Kol she'eno yachol lirkov al ktafav shel aviv, anyone who is not old enough to be on his father's shoulders, la'alos miYerushalayim leHar Bayis, from Yerushalayim to Har Bayit. So anybody who's too young, a baby that you have to hold in your hands, can't ride on the father's shoulders. It's too young. So anybody that's too young to ride on the father's shoulders, that is what makes you. I mean, that is indicative of whether or not you're chayav in re'iyah or you're not chayav in re'iyah. That divrei Beis Shammai. That's the opinion of Beit Shammai. Ubeit Hillel Omrim. Beis Hillel naturally has to disagree with Beis Shammai. Not actually, but you know. So Beis Hillel Omer, Beis Hillel says, Kol she'eno yachol achos beyado shel aviv. Any child that's unable to hold his father's hands and to walk while holding his hands, ve'alos miYerushalayim and the Har Bayis, and ascend from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis, meaning the child is holding his father's hands and they're walking from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis. Any kid who's too young to do that is not chayav in going to for re'iyah because they're considered a minor, a katan. Why does Beis Hillel give this answer? He gives us the luxury of giving us his reasoning. He says, "Shene'mar shalosh regalim," because the Torah says 3 pilgrimages. Now, pilgrimages is regalim in Hebrew. And regalim, if you change the vowels, it's the same letters as a regalayim, which means feet. So Beis Hillel is saying that you have to be old enough to go on your own 2 feet to be chayav and going for re'iyah. If you're on your father's shoulders, you're not going with your own 2 feet. You're on your father's shoulders. Your father is going with his 2 feet. So you're not chayav in going because you're not capable of using your own 2 feet. But if a child, even if it's by the support of holding his father's hands, can go with his own 2 feet, then he's chayav and re'iyah. That's according to Beis Hillel. So now we're going to discuss the value of the olat re'iyah, and also we're going to talk about the Chagiga sacrifice. So Beis Shammai says, Hare'iyah shtei kesef. The olat re'iyah is worth at least 2 silver ma'ot. V'chagiga ma'a kesef. And the chagiga has to be worth at least 1 silver ma'ah. Ubeit Hillel Omrim, and Beis Hillel says, Hare'iyah ma'a kesef. The re'iyah must be worth at least 1 silver ma'ah. The chagiga shtei kesef. Whereas the chagiga is worth at least 2 silver ma'os. The Hillel flips it, because again, they disagree a lot. So that's our Mishnah. It talks about first, everybody has to go except for this group of people. If you're deranged, if you're a child, and if you're deaf/mute, if you're old, etc., etc., etc. And it goes down the list. And then it talks about what's considered a child. And the Beis Hillel says if you can hold your father's hand and walk from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis. And Beis Shammai says that if you could ride your father's shoulders from Yerushalayim to Har Bayis, then you are chayav in going. But if you aren't capable of that, according to those opinions, then you're not chayav because you're considered a katan. And then it talks about the values of the re'iyah, the olat re'iyah, and also the chagiga sacrifice. Now we go into our Gemara. Now the Gemara, it picks up on the idea that it says hakol. Now why does it say hakol? Because the Gemara could have the Mishnah could have just said that that these people are not chayavim in going for re'iyah. But it specifically says everybody is chayav in going except for this list. So the Gemara is going to ask, why does it say the word everybody? Why does it say hakol? It's what is it coming to include? So it says hakol atuyemai. What is hakol coming to include? What fringe situation, what fringe examples is hakol coming to include that the Mishnah used that specific verbiage? So then the Gemara answers. It gives a potential answer. So it's talking about somebody who's half a slave and is half free. Now you might be thinking, somebody who's a slave is a full slave or a fully free man. He cannot and not a slave. How could you be half slave, half free? So the situation is that if a father passes away and he wills his 2 children ownership of 1 slave, meaning both brothers own 1 slave. Now one brother wants to hold on to the slave that his father gave him, while the other brother decides that he wants to free him. So the brother who wants to free the slave could only free his half, but the brother who wants to keep it still owns the half. So you get a situation where somebody is half a slave and half free, because half of his owners wanted to free him. Now this works with brothers or multiple owners who are partners. But if a slave is owned by multiple people and a portion of the owners free him, then he's technically partially free, partially owned. And we'll get into the halachic ramifications of that later on in the daf. But so the Gemara says that this is a potential answer, because hakol, what is it coming to include? Because we know that the Gemara lists somebody who's fully owned, meaning he's not yet freed, is not chayav. But what about somebody who's half owned? Maybe the Gemara is saying hakol is to include that a person who's half owned is chayav and going for re'iyah. So then the Gemara refutes this answer. He says, Le Ravina, except Ravina holds, Da Amar mi shechetzo aved vechetzio ben chorin patur min re'iyah. But Ravina holds that somebody who's half owned, half free, is patur. So clearly, hakol can't come to include that half-halfer is what we're going to call it because it's shorter. A half-halfer, half owned, half free person is patur from going, not chayav. So hakol can't come to include that person is chayav because Ravina says it's patur. So according to the people who don't agree with Ravina, what is hakol coming to include? So the question stands. Hakol atuye mai. The Gemara asks it again. What's it coming to include? I didn't like that answer. So then the Gemara gives another potential answer. The Gemara says la'atuye chiger beyom rishon. It's coming to include somebody who was sick on the first day, v'nit pashet beyom sheni. But by the second day he's healed. On the first day he was injured, and as we said in our Mishnah, that it's umisha eno yachol la'alos beragla. Somebody who can't go up with his own 2 feet, so he was too injured to walk on the first day of one of the Shorosh Regalim. But then on the second day, he's totally fine. He can walk on his own. So that person, that's what Hakol is coming to include. That's the fringe situation that Hakol is coming to include. It's somebody who's sick on the first day, but on the second day he's healed. He's still chayav and going. That's the Gemara's second attempt to answer this question. But the Gemara isn't satisfied with this answer. It doesn't like it. It says, "Ve'hincha leman da'amar kulan tashlumin zelazeh." According to the opinion that every single day is its own entity, it's its own inyan every single day, then that makes sense. Somebody who misses the first day still has the opportunity to fulfill his chiyuv for the second day, for the third day, and fourth day, etc., etc. Aval ella. Rather, Laman Damar Shakulan Tashlumin Derishon. What about somebody who holds? There's an opinion. Omer is an example where this opinion is one of the opinions, where all of the days together makes one chiyuv. So if you miss the first day, then it's unfortunate to be you because you've missed your opportunity. The ship has sailed. So you missed the first day. Then according to that opinion, you're still patur for the second day. So hakol doesn't come to include that person because that person is patur because he missed the first day. So the question stands. What does hakol come to include? Because we brought 3 answers, and those 3 answers were wrong. So then the Gemara asks again, hakol atuye mai. What does hakol come to include? So it says atuye suma be'achas me'enav. So the Gemara says fine. It's somebody who's blind in one eye. Udaloka hai Tana. And our Mishnah's ruling is not like that of the other Tana. Then our Mishnah disagrees with the Tana. The Tanya, because we learn in the Brisa, Rav Yochanan ben Dahava Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Yochanan ben Dahava says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Suma be'achas me'enav pater min ha're'iyah. That somebody who's blind in one eye is pater from re'iyah, doesn't have to go. So Hakol can't come to include that because he's clearly pater according to this Braita. Shnei Amar, and what's the source of this Braita? It says Yir'eh Yira'eh, because it is stated that it is stated according to the written form Yira'eh, you shall see. But according to the pronounced form, when you read it in the Torah, you have to read it Yera'eh, which means shall be seen, meaning that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming to Har HaBayis, so he shall be seen by us. And just like so we shall be seen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just like Kederech Ba'aliros, and just like God sees us, the way that God sees us, Kach Ba'aliros, so too we should see. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees with two eyes. It's in the analogous sense. Then clearly, we're non-corporeal. We don't believe that Kadosh Baruch Hu has a physical body, but we a lot of times attribute in a theoretical, non-physical. It's the Rebbeim in their own ways. They attribute some bodily things, like it says in the Torah, also Yad Chazaka. But so it says God sees us. How would a being see with two eyes? So because God sees us with two eyes, somebody who has one eye is not fulfilling it the same way that it needs to be done. Because just like God is seeing us, we need to see him with two eyes. Ma'aliros v'shteinov, just like God sees with his two eyes, so to speak, meaning total vision. Af liros v'shteinov, so too we must see with both of our eyes. So Hakol can't come to include somebody who's blind in one eye, because we hold that somebody who's blind in one eye is patur, and we're trying to see what does Hakol come to include for somebody that's chayav. Which situation is Hakol coming to include for somebody who's chayav? So then the Gemara returns and says, you know what? Let's circle it back and let's go back to our first answer, and maybe we can salvage that situation and use that. It says then, as the first answer for the refresher, the first answer was the one where it's a half free man, a half slave, the half-halfer, so to speak. So it says ibait ema, and maybe you prefer to say the olam kide amre meikra, that really the explanation was like the original answer, meaning the one that's half-half. But what if you as the Gemara brought up? So what about your kashya with Ravina, that he holds that it's not, that they're not patur? Lo kashya. The Gemara says it's not a problem. I have an answer for you. Kan Mishnah Rishona. This is the first Mishnah. The Kan Mishnah Achrona. But there's another Mishnah, but that Mishnah that Ravina is referring to is okay. No, it says Kan Mishnah Rishona. The ruling there later in the Mishnah is understood by Ravina accords with Beit Hillel's initial teaching. Beit Hillel initially had the opinion that a person who's half owned, half free, that they do not, they're pater because they're semi-owned, so they're pater. The Kan Mishnah Achrona, but our Mishnah here is talking about Beis Hillel's last opinion, because Beis Hillel seemingly has a switch of opinion. Ditnan, for we have learned in the Mishnah, Misha Chetzo Eved v'Chetzo Ben Chorin, anybody who's half free, half owned, Oved et Rabo Yom Echad ve'et Atzmo Yom Echad. So the Beis Hillel holds in a Mishnah that one day he's free and one day he works for his master. That's what it means to be half-half. You work on Monday for your master, Tuesday you're free, Wednesday for your master, Thursday you're free, and it oscillates back and forth. Divrei Beis Hillel. That's the opinion of Beis Hillel. Amru Lam Beis Shammai. But then Beis Shammai answers, Tiknan et Rabo. You have remedied the situation of the master, because the master owns half the slaves, so the master's happy. I get half of the slave's time. Ve'et asma lo tiknan. But you haven't fixed the situation for the half slave. He has a bad situation. Lis shifcha eno yachol. A slave is only allowed to marry a slave, but this half slave can't marry a slave woman because she can't marry his free half. Bas chorin eno yochlin, and a free woman can't marry a slave, so he can't marry a free woman either because she's usher to his slave half. So he can't marry a slave woman and he can't marry a free woman. Lebatel. You're telling me that he should remain idle? Lebata? The guy, he can't marry anybody. He can't marry a free woman. He can't marry a slave. He can't marry any woman. So Lebata, he's just going to stay idle and not going to do anything. V'halo lo nivra ha'olam el lepriya. But isn't this world created for purvu malot aretz? Aren't you supposed to reproduce? How is it that you're going to make? How are you going to give this person a position where he can't marry anybody and he's not able to fulfill purvu? You've totally messed up his situation. Shnei Amar, as is written, Lo tohu bara l'shavat yitzara. God did not create the world to be desolate. He created it to be inhabited, to be lived in. Ella mipnei tikun la'olam. Rather, for the betterment of society. Kofin et rabo ve'ose oto ben choren. So what we do is we nudge the second owner who wants to hold on to the slave, and we say, free him, make him free. So one person frees him, and the other person says, no, I want to keep him. So the rabbis, what they do is they nudge him, they say, come on, free him, free the guy. He needs to get married. He needs to have a family. It's a chiyuv. Free the guy. That's the whole reason the world was created. You have to do puravu, free him. So So then the slave, he has to write a contract that he's going to pay the owner half of his worth. They say how much this guy's worth and say, you own half of me, so I'll pay you half of my value and free me. So I'm buying myself off of you. So Beis Hillel hears this argument and says, you know what, you're right. V'chazru Beis Hillel the leharot kedivrei Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel says, you're right, and they reversed their opinion and ruled in accordance to Beis Shammai. They actually agreed on something. So the Gemara asked the question, Hakol la'atuye mai, to summarize. And we said that Hakol la'atuye mai comes to include somebody who's half slave, half owned. And then, but we say, but wait, Ravina says that somebody who's half slave, half owned, he's putter. He doesn't have to go for Re'iyah. He doesn't have to go according to Ravina. But then the Gemara comes back and says, that's Ravina who's quoting Beis Hillel's opinion before Beis Hillel changed his mind. See, Ravina is quoting Beis Hillel's initial opinion, which holds that a slave that is half owned, half free. On Monday he works, on Tuesday he's free. On Monday he works, on Wednesday he works, on Thursday he's free. Friday he works, and that's how it works. It oscillates back and forth. But Beis Shammai says that you're totally messing up this guy's whole life. The guy can't get married, and that's the purpose of this world. So then Beis Shammai, they convinced Beis Hillel to change their opinion, and Ravina was quoted saying Hillel's initial opinion, not his revised opinion. So Hakol comes to include the person who's half owned, half free. So that is the first Amud plus some change. I try and stop it at an Amud exact, unless I see that there's an end of a sugya near the top of the next page. But if it's something where the end of a sugya is in the middle of the daf, then I'm just going to end it there, because I do want to keep these under 20 minutes, and this went to 23 to 25 minute range, and that's good, but I don't want to make this too large for people to consume. So anyways, yeah. So we're going to be doing this series, 20-minute Talmud for Chagiga. And B'ezrat Hashem, may this learning be for the schus of all Am Yisrael, and anybody who's single to get married, anybody who's sick to be healthy, and may we all keep Rosh Hashanah in mind. And Chazak Baruch, I'll hopefully see you tomorrow. B'ezrat Hashem.